Hi everybody, welcome to the next episode of Future Focus CXOs. Today we have a very special guest, Bryan Jones. He is the CFO at Intradiem, which is a company that specializes in contact center management software. So without further delay, let me welcome Bryan to the podcast. Bryan, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Do you mind giving a good introduction about yourself? I know you have a very non-traditional CFO role and we would love to dive into that.
Happy to. So I've been at Intradiem for about 10 years. I've been the CFO for about 6 over the last several years, added to my kind of traditional CFO roles of finance and accounting. First had the HR team, which we call the people team, had that responsibility for about 4 years, added what we call the technology team, so responsible for all internal technology, software, hardware, everything. Then I took on the legal team, and all legal responsibilities roll up through me, as well as we call it competitive enablement, as well as strategic pricing. And it's a little bit of a broad span, a little more than your kind of traditional CFO, a little non-traditional, but it really impacts a lot of the business and really love what it is I do.
A little bit of everything. Yeah. So you still have HR and legal?
Do not have HR anymore. HR moved up under our CEO, Jennifer Lee, about a year ago. Jennifer is a first-time CEO, and she's fantastic. She had never had responsibility for the people team or HR team before in her career, and she wanted that experience, so the HR team reports up to her now.
The first thing that we heard from you is before you took this job at Intradiem, a lot of priorities and things changed. It was almost a 6 months of period before you took up the job, and you come from a lot of big companies, which we'll get into. So talk to us about what changed and what you realized and why you landed where you landed and why did you take this job?
Yeah, I left my prior company in March of 2015, and it was a restructuring, and so lost my job. Like a lot of us, I went through a job transition, job search. It took me about 6 months to find the Intradiem job. In that process, I met with all kinds of really fascinating people. And my original job search when I first started was rather scattershot. Anything that had finance in it, I was applying for. As I started to meet more and more people started asking me, Bryan, what's really important to you? What are you actually looking for in your next role? So that each of these meetings, people would ask me that. What are you actually looking for? So that actually caused me to get real specific. What really became important to me, number one, was culture. I had come from a company that, let's say, didn't have the best culture. Every company is going to have a culture. You can be intentional about it or not. But I had been at UPS prior to that company, and that was where I first really learned about how a strong company culture could really help drive people, drive results, and help you feel integrated into an organization. So that was actually number one on my list. And then from there, I really decided, based on my experience, I came up with 6 things that were actually on my list of things that were important. Number one is that I wanted it to be a small company. So I had worked at UPS, I had worked at divisions of First Data Corporation and First Financial Management prior to that. I worked in a manufacturing company that was publicly traded, but still 10,000 employees and $2 billion in revenue. But I worked in a small corporate office. So 50, 60 people in the office. And that was where I got my first taste of what really working for a small company was like. Even though it was big, that
setup was small.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So I decided I really want to take a shot at a small company where I can really have an impact. So I wanted it to be small. I wanted it to be private. I had been on the public side my entire life. I wanted it to be in the tech space. So I had worked in logistics and transportation and worked in manufacturing. And so tech was just something that was personally interesting to me. I wanted it to be a company that was going to do some sort of a transaction, whether it be an IPO or go through a sale process. And so private equity backed is always going to do that. Another thing that was really important to me was finding a role where I could come in and create it myself, build it from scratch. My personality is not one where I come in and just be a caretaker of something that somebody else has already put into place. I like building things from scratch. And then my 6th one was a little bit of a throwaway, but I really was passionate about service and wanted to find a company that was truly involved in service, not just, hey, we give you 3 days a year to go volunteer somewhere. That's nice, but it's not really passionate about service. And when I found the Intradiem job, it actually matched all 6 of those criteria. That's what helped me get focused and ended up finding the Intradiem job.
So let me ask you a follow-up question, right? Coming from such a good experience, you were very intentional about selecting your next gig, Looking back now, you have been here for a while. What parts you enjoy and what parts you feel are different than you thought as you took this job?
Yeah, great question. What I feel is different is that actually the culture we have at Intradiem is even better than I had hoped for. And we talked a whole lot about service. Service was interesting, which was interesting and important to me. And when I first went on the Intradiem website, and our founder, Matt McConnell, has a video on there about the servant's heart culture of the company. What I didn't realize was how people first Intradiem actually is. And that honestly is our secret sauce, is that we are truly a people-first organization. And so in addition to the servant's heart, we are also people-first. And so the culture is actually better than I could have possibly imagined. The work is different than being in a larger company. When you get into a larger company, things get more and more specialized. Yeah. And the things that I'm involved in now, in addition to just my normal span that I talked about a minute ago, but I'm just involved in so many things.
We wear a lot of hats.
Exactly. We all wear a lot of hats. The other thing was coming in, it was a small company. It was probably 10, 12 million in revenue and maybe 75 people when I started. I was brought in to build out the FP&A function. And I was a one-man show. And so I used to joke I had a team of 3. It was me, myself, and I. You had to dive in. And we had C-level people that were diving in because that's just what it is you do when you're a 75.
So you're enjoying that kind of culture where you wear multiple hats, because some people don't like it. Some people like a very boxed.
Yeah, I love being involved in so many different things. You just get to see the entire business. Now, there are times in which I go from meeting to meeting and I'm like, what are we talking about? But just being involved in the entire business, you get to see everything. So that's the beauty of being in a smaller company like that.
What is it about you talked a lot about the culture and its intentionality. We know that cultures are designed or defaulted to, right? You either get one if you don't focus on it or you design it. So what does it look like at Intradiem that gives you that ability to go, this is so intentional? And how do you build that in, especially when you're making a lot of financial decisions on how everybody executes in every other area of the business?
Yeah. Started with our founder, and he was just so intentional. We use the word intentional a lot. And he likes to say that our particular culture has its own immune system. If you come in and you don't fit in the culture, you're just not going to make it. I've come across 2 or 3 people in my 10-year career at Intradiem where the first time I met them, I'm like, they're not going to make it here, because I could tell they weren't going to fit in the culture. The type of people that were promoted into leadership positions. So Jennifer Lee, our CEO now, and myself, we both started 10 years ago. And both Jen and I have been promoted throughout the company. So she and I have grown up in the culture. We're just 2 examples of that. And so the people who fit the culture and execute well typically get kind of raised up in the organization. The intentionality of it, we talk about it all the time. Every single town hall we do, and we are now 100% remote. We have been since COVID. And so when we decided to shut our office down at the end of 22, it was myself and Matt, our CEO, and Kim Heiler, our Chief People Officer. We were kind of the facilities team. When we decided we're not going to have an office anymore, our first question was, how do we maintain the culture? In that meeting, we were like, we have got to be very intentional about it. Every single town hall, we do a town hall every other week. The first thing we talk about is our vision, mission, values, and culture. Every meeting. And so there's no way you're not going to know what they are, but it is one thing to be on the slide and it's another to be lived out. The type of leaders that are within the organization, they just live out the values, and that starts from the leadership team all the way down. And Jen and I are very intentional about it. When I had the people team, Kim and I were very intentional about that sort of people first lens. We had a budget meeting. It was in September of 22. It was coming on the back end of our all-hands meeting that we had here. And Matt and I went and presented to the senior leadership team a fairly draconian budget. It was going to be really difficult. And Jen Lee, our now CEO, she sat there in the meeting and she said, I look at this budget and I don't see a people-first budget. This is a shareholder-first budget. So that's the lens we all use. And we sat there in the meeting and said, okay, if we're going to change this to people-first and have that people-first lens, what does that mean for the budget? So we sat there in the room, recast the budget, and then Matt and I went to the board and said, we have this people first culture. This is the budget we want to present because these are the things we want to do from a people perspective. And they bought in. And so it's that sort of lens we look at every decision through. Now, we have people that'll say, if I don't get to what I want, then you're not people first. So it doesn't quite work that way.
That's not a people first thought.
Exactly. But we look at the whole organization and try to filter so many things through how do we put our people first. Jen has stood on the stage in front of our customers at our customer events and said, you're not number one, our people are. Wow. And so that whole culture though is that if we take care of our people are free to take care of our customers. It's actually the reverse, and then if we take care of our customers, our shareholders are going to win. That's the whole philosophy.
But I love the concept of if it's an intentional building of a culture, it has its own immune system.
Yes.
So people coming and disturbing it, those kind of viruses won't stay there, right?
No, that's exactly right. You're either going to adapt to the culture or you're not going to survive.
You can't come and disturb this culture anymore.
It's going to be really hard.
I love that
Tough
concept.
decisions against a very cohesive team.
Yes.
When they're like, I love that Jen could even push back on you.
Oh, absolutely.
On how to do that. And the freedom and the courage made available to do that. And the benefit of it, that in itself shows that even when they're corrected, the person, they're like, look, we understand this might not be the right decision. Here's why. Yeah. Let's rearrange and work together on it. That shows up. I love that example because I think that it's really difficult for teams as they get board and new leadership and new direction, they start to put in new executives. It's like all of a sudden these CXOs are making decisions, and if they think and make decisions differently, they can dramatically shift the way the culture is expressed into the company and out to the customers. It used to be like this, but now you're like this, and you put in all these restraints and all these changes, and now the product design, and now the sales is not the same. The prices are doing these things, and it permeates everywhere. That can come from one or two CXOs with too much freedom without being accountable to the rest of the team or the board or the culture itself. It's great that it purges itself.
Yes. We've had some CXOs come in and try to challenge, and most of them have adapted. The ones that haven't have moved out. That's exactly right.
No, but for her to be the first time CEO and you presenting a stakeholder-led budget could have been a good thing for her to take it upstairs.
Yeah.
But she had the courage of saying that, no, this doesn't fit in our culture. That speaks volumes about staying 10 years into the culture and rising up. She cares about it so much.
Exactly. Jen and I both saw Matt, our founder and CEO. We saw Matt set that culture. Matt will give us a lot of credit, but he deserves it all. He set the tone way before we got there. Another example was during COVID. And we all went and redid our budgets in March of 2020, right? And so that whole weekend after that Friday, March 13th, when everything shut down, my head of finance and I reworked the budget the entire weekend. We had a meeting with Matt on 5, 6 o'clock on Sunday. And we get into that meeting and we had all the levers we were going to pull. And Jonathan Adams is my head of finance. And Jonathan and I worked at this manufacturing company when we went through the housing downturn. So we knew all the levers to go pull. We get to Matt at 6 o'clock on Sunday. And the first thing Matt says is, okay, rule number 1, no layoffs. Period. And so we are going to protect everybody's job. Wow. We had to do a bunch of other things. We had to postpone 401k contributions. We had to postpone raises, all that sort of stuff. But when we went out to our employees at the town hall 2 weeks after that started and said, here are the changes we are making, but here's rule number 1, we're not going to do any layoffs. We got Slacks, we got emails thanking us. So we were cutting all kinds of other things, but all these people—
Everybody supported.
Yeah, all these people were seeing all their friends getting laid off and things like that. When you live it out like that, that proves it to people that it's not just something on a slide.
Yeah, you got employees for life.
Yeah, exactly.
You get them through that crisis and they'll give up and they're looking, I would be thinking, yeah, I'll give up my 401k so you can have a job with me and you can stay with us. Yeah. Like, I know, your families, I know all this other stuff. Okay, you're doing that, cut whatever you need to, keep us in line.
Exactly. This was not a huge sacrifice, but we also led a little bit by example. The entire senior leadership team took a pay cut. We were the only ones to do that, but it was just another example of, hey, we're serious about this. And so it was something small we could do just to be symbolic, but say, We are serious. We are going to do everything we can to save everybody's jobs. And you're right. When you're in a relationship that you really believe in and are taken care of, you're going to fight for that. When you're intentional about the culture and you actually live it out, it can pay huge dividends.
Early on when you started at Intradiem, you were told you have 6 weeks to make a budget. Go get one.
Yeah.
How did you develop the kind of financial frameworks for working through a company that's in high growth like that?
It was day 2, literally the CFO, we had our 8:30 stand-up meeting and he said, okay, Bryan, we got the budget to do in 6 weeks. Go do it. So I barely knew where the restroom was, and so I hadn't even logged into the financial system yet, but I'd done that in other organizations. I did it in manufacturing, I did it at UPS in transportation and logistics, and I'd done it at another software company 20 plus years ago. P&L works the same, the balance sheet works the same, cash flow works the same. It's really about understanding the business drivers and understanding the industry. So first thing I went to was spending a lot of time with the sales team and just understanding, okay, what is it that we're actually selling? Who are we selling it to? What are the predictors of the business? What's our average contract size? All those sorts of things. Understanding what those sort of metrics are. Once you start to understand the business drivers, then you start to really understand the business and you can build the model out of that. Everything else, it's people and tools and materials. And so on the P&L, it's typically pretty easy. Manufacturing gets a whole lot more complicated, but it was really about understanding the business drivers and then getting in and understanding. In our business, it's 80% of our cost is people. You got 80% of your cost there. Then some businesses are really balance sheet focused. This one really isn't. Small software companies are nothing but about cash. Cash is everything. And once you understand the business drivers, you can start focusing on the top line. And then once you get into the expenses, given what happens on the top line, you bring on new customers, what's the support around that? So understanding then the expense drivers, understanding the people and things like that. So the model's the same. You just have to get in and understand what each of them is for each individual industry. Hardest part to me was simply just building the model in Excel. It just took a long time. I had to build all the formulas and all that. But given my experience across a number of industries, I knew what to go look for. And it was really understanding all those key business drivers.
Bryan, we understand you were hired for FP&A.
Yes.
Then you join an investor call. And with your experience, you speak into it, and now then you get an additional responsibility of doing investor relationship management. Yeah. Talk to us about that and how that has shaped your career in Intradiem.
How I got invited to that investor call. When I was at my prior company, I started up the FP&A function there as well. I'd probably been there for 2 years, and literally my first day, I met my boss at the Atlanta airport. We flew down to Tampa. And the company I was with was getting spun out of another company. And we're working on the quarterly earnings call. And so started like literally writing the script day one, my very first day on the job. I was involved in the earnings process from the very beginning. Writing the script, doing the press release, all the analytics that are involved in the earnings call. So anyway, after about 18 months or so, our head of strategy there, who also ran investor relations, she was going to put up a role for a kind of junior investor relations person. I went to my boss and said, I'm actually really interested in doing this. The question was, can you do that and the FP&A role at the same time, which is really what I wanted to do. So then I started joining investor calls. And so this is with hedge funds, Wall Street analysts, things like that. When you're on the public side, you have Regulation FD, which is all about here's the story you can tell. These are the numbers we have released. This is all the materially public information. Prior to that, actually, when I was with UPS on the competitive analysis side, I listened to dozens and dozens of earnings calls. So heard all the questions, listened to the scripts and all of that sort of stuff. That's where I really learned about how storytelling around the numbers and business really, because earnings calls in many ways are really marketing calls or sales calls. Oh, yeah. And Wall Street sell-side analysts, they're sales folks, right? And so it's really telling the story around the numbers, taking that into that investor relations role, getting that experience over a number of years. I did hundreds of hedge fund manager calls and went to investor conferences, did all the one-on-ones, all that sort of stuff. So I get to Intradiem, and back to your original question, there was a call that an internal team was putting together a presentation for our CEO to go to an investor conference. Somehow I got invited to the call, I don't remember how, but in the middle of the conversation around that presentation, there was something from my investor relations background where I piped up and said, look, I've got an investor relations background. Here's how I think we should show this slide. So one of our board members was on the call and he said, Bryan, you did investor relations? I said, yes. He said, for a public company? I said, yes. He goes, all right, talk to me after the call. So, okay, great. So we finish up the call, and as soon as we hung up, he called me and said, okay, tell me everything you did in investor relations. So I told him about the road shows, all the presentations, just the whole background. So he said, okay, as of now, you are our investor relations guy. And so we're not going to do any banker meetings, any investor conferences without you there. I was only 2 offices down from our CEO, but we didn't work together all that much. But suddenly we started traveling a lot together, going to these investor meetings. I taught Matt a good bit about how to tell a story, and he had all the history of the company, which I just soaked up from him. So he and I traveled together for a couple years doing hundreds of calls. But during all those conversations and the travel and everything, that was where Matt really got to see me more than just the FP&A guy and saw the strategy, saw the investor relations, saw the way that I thought about the business, and that I think kind of led him to say, okay, he might be the next CFO.
Oh, wow. So that shaped up your career, brought you up.
Absolutely, it did.
Now, we talked earlier about the fact that you took a Socratic method course and how it has changed the critical thinking skills that you learned there and how it changed the way you execute as a leader. Can you give us some insight into how that's worked for you and what do you do with it on a regular basis?
It was a class with the American Management Association, which is called Critical Thinking. I forget even how I got signed up for that, but it was quite simply one of the best classes I've ever taken, undergrad or grad school. I learned so much, truly understanding the why behind everything and the so what. That class challenged us. It was one of those, you took an assessment and it placed you in one of 4 quadrants and said, this is how you think. In the class, we had to actually do a presentation based on our dominant quadrant. And then we had to do a presentation from the perspective of our weakest quadrant. It really forced you to say, okay, how would I think about this if this is the way that I thought? So it was super challenging because we don't think that way. So it just caused you to intentionally think about things from a different perspective. So I just came out of that just with that sort of questioning mindset. First, what I started doing was just questioning myself. So any model that I put together, any presentation that I put together, I would intentionally try to think of, okay, this is in a meeting, I'm going to have somebody from sales, somebody from marketing, somebody from engineering. How would they think about this and what questions might they ask? If I'm looking at a slide or looking at a model, can I answer those questions based on what's on the page? So I did have a CFO at one juncture at UPS Logistics told me about a PowerPoint slide. If you can't answer the question, so what? It's not really a great slide. Very often say, okay, what's the so what of this? What's the takeaway? You start asking those sort of questions and looking at it from that perspective, it helps refine, what it is that you are presenting. Now, with all my teams, I start asking them those same questions. Most of the time I know the answer, but I'm trying to get them to think just a little bit differently and see things from a different perspective and see things from, if we're going to go present something to Jen or our head of marketing, how are they going to think about it? What questions are they going to ask? All it does is sharpen the thinking all the way around. I've sent a number of people that have worked for me or that I've mentored to take that class because it was so powerful. Now, let's say we're at a senior leadership meeting and we're talking about, something on the engineering side or something on sales. I just try to think about what is something that people aren't thinking of or not talking about. Is there something there? And just ask off the wall and challenging questions. Very often, I try to check our premise, right? And so a lot of people, their premise or assumptions, we may be working off different assumptions or different premises. So tell me what you're actually thinking about that. How do you actually define that? I read an article over 20 years ago called The Wisdom of the Dumb Question. Anybody on the senior leadership team, anybody on my team will have heard me say, I'm sure this is a dumb question, but a lot of times they're basic questions, but you'd be surprised at the different perspective or different assumptions or different definitions that people have on those basic questions.
Now I know why you are being called as asking tough, layered questions. Give us an example of how that approach changed a decision or shaped a decision, which you could have gone different way if those questions were not asked.
So I was at UPS Logistics, and there was a business unit that they asked me to analyze and come up with a recommendation. So I was running all the numbers. That's the financial model I was doing. And so I ran all the numbers, and I'm like, okay, this is a good business. At the time, UPS was really focused on return on invested capital. We looked at the business, and almost nothing you could do could actually get us to that particular hurdle rate for return on invested capital. You would think from a financial decision, all right, just divest of it. But one of the questions that I had was, does this business as is, even though it has subpar returns, does it have a strategic value? Does it bring something else into the business? And so the answer to that was yes. And so they actually held on to the business and actually acquired something else to go into that business. And when I was at the manufacturing company, I took that same set of questions. There was a business there that was a little more commoditized. There were 4 players in the industry instead of your kind of best case of 3. So we were running the numbers and we were like, this does not meet our financial return objectives. So I then went to that next level and said, does this bring any strategic value? And the answer was no. In that case, that was a case where we ended up divesting of the business. There was another one that was just a recent at our senior leadership. We were talking about our 3 core values of servant's heart, craftsman's attitude, and revolutionary spirit. Jen, our CEO, really likes to focus on growth mindset. She has talked growth mindset to the company. We're having all hands coming up where growth mindset is going to be a big focus. So she was actually asking, should we add a 4th core value? It's always better to have 3, right? So a lot of people were like, we can do 4. I was just like, what if we just replace one? What if we replace revolutionary spirit? Because growth mindset, it's tangential to it. Matt, our CEO, was like, we came up with revolutionary spirit at a certain time in the company. And now perhaps we've evolved. And Jen was like, I hadn't thought of it that way. So anyway, those are just a couple of examples of, you just ask the question that is just a little bit different, thinking about it from a different perspective, and sometimes it can really pay off.
I do remember in college my one Socratic teacher, which was terrifying. 90 minutes every day, because you never knew where they're going.
Yes.
And you never knew what they're going to ask. And I did more work, but man, it was amazing being able to sit with executives or tech folks or anybody I can interrogate down to, if you can't explain this to me, then either you don't understand it or this is too complicated and it may be a problem and there may be a reason why some decision needs to be made. Exactly. And so it was exceptionally valuable.
Yes.
And just to be able to know how to ask those kind of dumb questions and get you all the way down.
All the way down.
And let's get all the way down to what do we really want. Life-changing.
Yes.
Frustrating as heck to everybody else. But once they see the benefit, it's...
Yeah. A lot of people they get defensive when you ask them questions. And frankly, early in my career, I was too, because you take it as criticism. Instead of how can we make this better? Have you thought it all the way through? And so, once you can get past
attack
critical,
on you or
you haven't done anything wrong. It's just really rounding it out. Then it makes everybody better.
Unless you're exceptional at really dumb ideas, then eventually that's going to wear on you.
Before we run out of time, I definitely want to ask you, because you did speak about you having a mentor and you really following him in the initial parts of your career. So tell us about that experience and how that has shaped you and your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my very first company that I was at, I had a CFO come in. His name was Steve Greenwald. Steve took me under his wing and became his kind of right-hand guy. When I first started, I was in the accounting function, and then I started off with a little kind of FP&A and started working with Steve a little bit more. And I learned just several things from him. One is just his sort of gentle demeanor was just fantastic. Steve would never say, Bryan, I need you to do this, or Bryan, work on this project. Just simply the way that he asked. He would say, Bryan, do me a favor. Can you build this model to do this? And so just something simple like that. He never, ever failed to say thank you. as well. And so that is something that I'm not perfect at, but I really try very hard, because the people that work for us work really hard. And it takes 5 seconds to say thank you. And Steve would do things like, we worked over a weekend, he'd say, take next Friday off. And we had a particularly terrible budget process season one time, and we slogged through it and got it done. And Steve and his wife took my wife and me out to a very nice dinner. And I can't do that with everybody on my team, but what I can do, particularly when people are struggling or something, is that, or they're working extra hours and missing out with family time, I'll say, hey, look, you and your wife go out to dinner, just send me the bill. And then one of the things he did that actually really changed the trajectory of my career was I finished undergrad, I started grad school right away, and then I just got burned out. And I couldn't do it anymore. And so I had 8 classes left, and I took about 3 years off, and Steve and I went from one company to another. And anyway, one day he walks in my office and just said, hi, Bryan, I know you hate school, but if you ever want to sit in my chair, you just have to finish. Wow. You have to finish. And so I really didn't want to, but I listened and I went back. And so after 3 years off, I was really motivated and I really wanted to do well, and I finished, and that has made all the difference. And when I went back was all my kind of concentration courses at the Robinson School at Georgia State. And all my classes that I took were around strategy. That my MBA was in strategy. I took a technology strategy, I took a marketing strategy class, I took strategic planning, things like that. So if it hadn't been for Steve saying, you really got to go back and just finish.
Yeah. No, it relates to me very well, because when I graduated, immediately I got a job. I was going there, and after 3 months, the director calls me in his office. And he says, what's your further plans? And honestly, I had no plans.
Yeah.
Just got a job. I was just enjoying life. Right?
Yeah.
He says, you need to go back and apply for this institute. And there was a competitive exam to get it, and the passing rate was 3%.
Oh, wow.
I said, I'm not going to do that. Yeah. Right? 90% people fail there. He says, I want you to do it. And what he did to me was, he said, you come in every day, punch your card, go to the library and sit. You're not working. 3 months you're only studying. And do it for me. Yeah. And he called my parents and said, this is what I'm going to make him do, because he's going to be wasting his life here otherwise. And that completely changed. And I passed that exam. Can you believe that? And he said, see, I told you.
Believed in you.
Yeah. But that increased my belief in myself, right? Saying that, oh my God, if I can pass that kind of exam, I can do wonders in my life. And I believe I never lost touch with him. Now he passed away, unfortunately. But I think I relate to that. One person can completely shape up your career.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm sure you pass that on to somebody else as well. Yeah. I'd like to think I've passed along a lot of things that I learned from Steve on to people that have worked for me over the years.
Right? All these things are passing forward.
Yeah. So that's actually a great segue. What advice would you give others trying to go down the path of the CFO and work their way into that?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot of seemingly traditional paths. You either come up the finance route or you come up the accounting route. Mine was a little like this. I think it really prepared me to be the type of CFO that I am now. Last week in the prep, we talked about some of the roles that I say I took, but when I was at UPS, you didn't really take a role. You showed up on Monday and said, here's your new job, right? But there's a couple of things that I would not have chosen, but have served me very well. And I do talk to groups upon occasion who are going through job searches. And so one of the things that I tell them is that, look, this thing may not be exactly what you want, but it might be exactly what it is that you need. And so be open to that. And so when you're given that opportunity, what can you learn from it? What can you take from it? You never know what's going to happen down the road. I spent a year running sales compensation at UPS Logistics. I'm like, I'm never going to use this again. I use it all the time now. And I'm involved in all of our sales compensation design and plans now. There are multiple paths, but I think what is really evolving on the CFO side is not necessarily the technical accounting side. A lot of that's taken for granted. Now, I always said, and I'm not an accountant, if I become a CFO, I'm going to need a very strong controller. Fortunately, I really have one now. So our controller, Jenny, is outstanding, and she handles everything from the technical side and all that. But where I think CFO roles are going and have been going is that they're really a strategic partner to the rest of the business, particularly the CEO. I've always tried to see my role as the CFO as to be the right hand of the CEO and clue them in on everything that's going on in the business, have them be able to bounce ideas off of me and talk through things and really be a strategic partner. You have to have aspects of finance, obviously, accounting, obviously. Other things can be included in that, like investor relations. You have to be in touch with the rest of the business as well to provide that sort of strategic perspective. Staying in just a simple linear finance path or linear accounting path, it may be able to get you there, but I think to be really effective, you have to have a broad perspective of the business and be able to wear many hats like that.
And I think with so many podcasts we have done and understood the career path, we have not seen a linear path.
Yeah, that's the advice, is that take those opportunities that come available to you. There's typically a reason why. And Jen, our CEO, she came in as the head of success management, and her first C-level role was chief strategy officer. She had never done strategy before, but she was outstanding at it, and that launched her into this role. So again, another nonlinear path. Yeah.
Thank you, Bryan. It has been very insightful talking to you.
This has been great. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Feel free to follow us, comment. We would love to hear your views on how our podcast was. And if you have any questions for Bryan, feel free to get in touch and he will be happy to answer.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.